mid-season point of the college baseball season, and I welcome on the GOAT, Peter G. Flaherty. You can find a lot of his work at Baseball America, and he's our secret weapon over here in the college baseball space at Just Baseball. Pete, how you doing, my man?
What's up, Pete? I'm always happy to hop on and chop it up and talk some college baseball with you.
Some of my favorite times of the year is when you and I get on the mic and we just talk college baseball. So in this section of the Just Baseball show, we are going to talk about Pete's two big surprise teams at the midpoint of the college baseball season, as well as going over his top 5 teams. And scattered throughout, there will be a lot of big name players who I'm sure Pete wants to talk about. I've been enjoying this college baseball season. We have a future on Wake Forest, and that's going pretty well right now as they are living up to their name, Rake Forest, as well as pitchers like Rhett Lauder and Sean Sullivan has really stepped up as the Saturday guy. But of course, there's LSU. We're going to get into the top 5. But first, Pete, your first surprise team, right? Because we talked at the beginning of the season, we went through our top 10 teams, and could it be your favorite team, the Boston College Eagles?
So I grew up a BC fan, season tickets to football. I've actually got a BC football shirt on right now. And yeah, I think it's hard to not have my top surprise be the old Eagles from Chestnut Hill. Granted, they're coming off a sweep against Louisville, but they're still sitting at number 16 in the top 25. They didn't make the ACC tournament last year. They didn't make the ACC tournament the year before that. And they're not a super prospecty team. This isn't the 2021 team that had Cody Morissette, Sal Frelick, Mason Pelio, guys like that. It's just really timely hitting. Their pitchers attack the strike zone and throw quality strikes. And it's a pretty simple formula, but they're proving that if you just play sound baseball on either side of the ball, that you're going to have a pretty substantial amount of success. And they just got swept at Louisville. Louisville's a really good team. They haven't lost a home series since 2021.
Jeez.
But they're really good at Jim Patterson Stadium, but they could bounce back this week. So they're on track to make their first regional, I think, since 2016. And at this point, they would kind of have to play themselves out of it. So my first surprise is absolutely BC. Probably my number one surprise too.
So Ryan Miller, of course, we both know and is writing up prospect stuff, does a lot of college baseball stuff, is in charge of our mock drafts over here at Just Baseball. He gave me his top 10 because, we're all collabing with each other and trying to make the perfect top 10 teams. And he had BC at number 8. And they didn't make your top 10 team. Maybe he's just a little higher on some guys. Maybe he sees the potential. And maybe they're your favorite team. So you're maybe being a bit conservative with them. But do you think they have a real shot at Omaha? Because you say that they're not a very prospecty team. They have Joe Vitrano, who just will not stop hitting. I'm curious if you think they should be in that top 10, or if you're thinking, whoa, pump the brakes. Pump the brakes a little bit.
They're a great team. I think this past weekend at Louisville, the sweep was tough. They're kind of sitting around 500 in the ACC again. But I mean, if you get into a regional, that's all you really need for Omaha. And they've got the ingredients to go on a deep run. Joe Vitrano is a great player, like you mentioned. Travis Honeyman is as well, as is Cam Leary. That's kind of their three-headed monster on offense. But pitching wise, they've got a bona fide ace in Chris Flynn. He's a great story. He was actually a walk-on at Division III Roger Williams, and he made the team. Roger Williams was very successful there. Entered his name into the portal, found his way to BC, and he's emerged as obviously their ace on the staff, but one of the top pitchers in the conference. So really cool story there. I think that they can certainly get in. They were 27 outs from Omaha the last time they made a regional in 2016. They took Miami to a game 3. And I know that if they get in, they're going to play really hard. And if they get a favorable draw, which I think for them doesn't include a team like a very offensive team, I don't know if they'd want to get into a shootout with anyone. I think they're more suited for kind of a pitcher's duel. So if they can get into a regional and have their super regional team be kind of a manageable matchup for them, I think they've got that type of upside.
Number 2 surprise team. So we had to talk about your Eagles, but who's that other team that you just didn't see coming?
The other team I didn't really see coming and took me by surprise was Kentucky. And Kentucky, they're no stranger to strong starts. They started off 14-4 last year. I think 19-3 or something of that nature the year before. I may have had those flipped, but they've gotten off to really strong starts in the last two seasons. But the wheels have kind of fallen off once SEC play rolled around. But this year they are showing that they're for real. They're 27-5. They're 18-1 at home, 9-3 in the SEC. They did have a little bit of a hiccup at Georgia this week, but that's not really of any concern. They're still very clearly a regional team and in really good position to host. And the highlight for them has been their pitching. They've got just a 3.2 ERA as a staff. Their rotation has been really, really strong with Logan Martin and Zach Lee. And they've gotten jumps out of guys like Ryan Hagenow. Hagenow was a pretty highly touted prospect once he arrived on campus. Kind of struggled in a hybrid role his first couple of seasons, but moving to the back end of the bullpen where he's really blossomed. He hasn't allowed an earned run in 16 innings. So Kentucky's my other surprise. I think that they probably have more Omaha upside than a team like Boston College does, just from a sheer depth perspective. They have a lot deeper of a staff. They can swing it a little bit more, and that's not a knock against Boston College. It's just I think Kentucky really is that good, and they've got a quick turnaround this week. They're gonna have to really turn around because they go to Louisville and then they go to Alex Bach Stadium to take on LSU this weekend, which LSU's LSU. I think everyone knows what they're about at this point. So they're kind of going through their SEC gauntlet right now, but I think that it would, barring something really unforeseen, they're going to head to a regional and they're going to be a really tough out. So I'm excited about the Wildcats, really excited about BC, and I think those are my two top surprises this year.
Yeah, overall the college baseball season, we put out our 5 futures and all that kind of good stuff, and it's gone according to plan, right? So our 5 futures, they're all in basically every top 10 that you'll find on any publication. But there have been a couple of teams that have really come out of nowhere. Kentucky is one of them. And as we break into our top 5, number 4 on our list is a huge surprise. It's not something that, we would never expect, but at 4, it's nuts. But before we get to the number 4 team, let's get into your top 5 teams in college baseball right now. And we'll start with a team that's always in the top 5. But I think you and I were a little bit down on them because they didn't have quite the talent that they've had in previous years. But I think this just speaks to their coaching that year in and year out, they do have a good roster. Of course they do. They have a great roster. But it's just when we're comparing it to other Vandy teams, it's not quite to that level. But you look at this Vandy team, we have them at number 9. It's just a typical team. Super well-rounded bunch. They got pitchers, they got hitters, they play defense, and they just win ball games. What has been, I guess, the main takeaway from Vanderbilt this season?
I think I've been most surprised with their offense. I came into this year knowing that they were going to throw the ball really well. Their staff is really good with Carter Holton and Bryce Cunningham up at the top. And then obviously Devin Futrell's been outstanding. But I've been pretty blown away with the production they've gotten on the offensive side. Grad transfer RJ Schreck in particular has really been has really been helpful for him. He's sitting around 350, 11 doubles and 8 home runs. And then true freshman Chris Maldonado, he's a great player. I wasn't expecting to be sitting here after Easter Sunday saying that he's Vanderbilt's best freshman. But he's Vanderbilt's best freshman. He's hitting 370, 11 doubles and 4 home runs. And then they've really flipped the switch. Like if you look at their stats on offense right now, I don't know them off the top of my head, but I don't think that you're going to be like really the Vandy offense, because they're not unbelievably loud. But through the first, up until their series with Ole Miss, people were talking about the Vanderbilt offense as like their Achilles heel, their main issue. Are they going to be able to hit enough against teams in the SEC? I don't think they're going to be able to hit enough, all that. But since that Ole Miss series, they've really flipped a switch and have gone berserk. They've gotten production up and down the lineup. It's clear they're playing with a huge chip on their shoulder, and combine that with their good pitching. And they're 26-6 overall, 11-1 in the SEC. I'm kind of hard pressed to find a better resume in the entire country.
So one of my favorite players in college baseball to watch is Enrique Bradfield Jr. And he's had a good year, right? But I don't think he's had the year that even I expected. Maybe you expected this type of year from Enrique Bradfield Jr. He's slashing 291, 456, 462. He's getting on base a ton, and he has 23 stolen bases. But I was hoping that he'd tap into a little bit more power this year, and it hasn't quite come in yet. He's still a great player. He's still an all-world defensive player. But I was thinking he had an outside shot at the number 1 overall pick. But now I don't think so. What has been your takeaway from a guy like that this season?
Obviously, I think he's sitting around 290. I know that he's probably expecting some more production, but everything that makes him great is still shining. And I have been kind of impressed with the juice he's shown. I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time around him this summer, and he was like, "Man, I got more power than like people give me credit for. Like, just trust me." And I was
agree.
like, all right.
It just hasn't shown up in the home run totals. Like, he's got 4 home runs. I was expecting like 7 or 8 by this point.
Yeah, he's got 4, but that very sneakily, I think that puts him second on the team in home runs, and he's got an outside shot to hit 10. And for a player with that kind of profile, I think even 8 to 10 home runs is extremely, extremely impressive. And he's going to end up hitting, I have no doubt in my mind, I think he's going to end up hitting around 320. And he's walking almost twice as much as he's striking out.
Yeah.
23 bags. He's starting to kind of put the ball in play, not put the ball in play more. He's starting to find the barrel more lately, find some grass. The defense, obviously, at the college level, he's the best center fielder in the country defensively. And he's got that Kenny Lofton, Juan Pierre kind of profiling, more Lofton, but number 1 overall pick, I think, is out of the picture at this point, just because of Dylan Cruz, who we'll probably talk about, but still been impressed with Enrique Bradfield. I think he goes probably in the first 20 picks or so. I've heard some good things about teams in the top 15 liking him. So I think that he'll go pretty good in the draft still.
No, that makes sense. I guess I held him to a standard that was almost impossible for him to reach. And because he couldn't reach my impossible standard, that I'm holding it against him slightly, when in reality, I probably shouldn't, just because I think he's such an incredible talent. So number 4, this is the freak team, the team that came out of nowhere. They're sitting at 28-4 on the season, 28 wins, 4 losses. Freshman of the year is probably Ethan Petrie. What does he have? 18 home runs. He's leading the nation in RBIs. And when I watch South Carolina, it's obvious that the talent jumps off the page. The power is enormous. He's an enormous human being. But I didn't even know he was 18. I didn't know this was a freshman when I first turned on the TV and watched South Carolina, because he doesn't look like it, right? He doesn't play like it. He doesn't act like it. He seems like he's been there for a couple of years. But at the end of the day, he's 18, and you got Braylon Wimmer, and the pitching staff looks really good. This team just doesn't lose. They came out of nowhere, and they just decided, you know what? We ain't losing this year. What has been the most impressive thing about South Carolina?
I think what you said, Ethan Petrie has been unbelievable. 6'4" true freshman, hitting 440, 15 bombs, second in the country with 51 RBIs. I mean, he's going to win National Freshman of the Year. And what's scary is they get him for another 2 years. And we're looking at a potential first overall type of guy in 2025. But again, they've gotten production from really everywhere. I think their power upside is super impressive. Gavin Cassis also 15 home runs. Braylon Wimmer with 9. I think Will McGillis has double digits. And then they're a well-rounded club. I have to admit, I was a little like iffy on just how good they were after their really good start. Obviously, what they got off to is, like, in baseball, I don't care who you play, winning, I think it was 20 of 21 games or something like that.
Just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen no matter who you play. If they were playing like high school teams, I'd still be impressed, just because baseball is that weird.
Yeah.
So I was really impressed. I wasn't like ready to call them a national title team just yet, which I was obviously wrong about, which I now think that they might even be better than their top 5 ranking or wherever they are right now. But they're super well rounded. They've got a great weekend rotation with Sanders, Hall, and Mahoney. Sanders is a way better arm than what his numbers show, and we saw it in a. Unfortunately, that Friday game that Thursday game got flipped on its head because of the weather. But we saw how good of a pitcher Sanders was in that outing. Mid-90s fastball, the slider was a plus pitch. They've gotten lights out pitching from their bullpen with the 2 Eli's and Jones and Jerzenbeck. Chris Veach has one of the better changeups I've seen this season. And again, they're I don't even know how to say it. They don't really have many holes, and it's tough to nitpick a club like this, which I'm not going to do because there's nothing to pick them on. They're 19-1 at home. They're playing really well on the road. We were really robbed of a game 3 against LSU because I think that would have been an absolute dandy. But the good news is they go on the road to Nashville to take on Vanderbilt this weekend in what's going to be another unbelievable series. And of course, all 3 games are on SEC Network Plus, which I don't know that the ESPNU probably has like college lax on, but they have another good series this weekend. I'm really excited about them. I think they do have national championship type upside. They're a team I would seriously consider picking right now to take it home. I think that they play with a lot of swagger. They don't think anyone can beat them in a good way. They're not going to be caught off guard, but they're a very, very impressive ball club that is clearly here to stay, and they're the class of the SEC.
Class of the SEC. We love to see it in it. And as we get further into this list, now we're in the top 3, it gets impossible to nitpick. And that starts with Florida, who's just a juggernaut, even though Wyatt Langford, who is projected to go within the first, 3 picks, because he's an unbelievable hitter. He's been absent for a while with an injury, but even without him, they are so good. Like Josh Rivera, BT Riopel, these kind of guys in their lineup just have stepped up. These veterans, right? With the absence of Langford, these guys step up. Then, like, you even have underclassmen, Cade Kurland, Michael Robertson, bunch of just really good players. And I haven't even mentioned the show of college baseball, Jack Caglione. He's taken a little bit of a step back as a pitcher, but he's still racking up Ks, and he's leading the league in home runs. He's kind of like college baseball Shohei Ohtani. And I said that on TikTok, and I got a lot of shit being like, no, he's not throwing 100 mile an hour with a 92 mile an hour sweeper like Ohtani. I wasn't saying he's Ohtani right now. I'm saying the combination of a hitter and a pitcher with that type of power with great strikeout stuff is college baseball's version of Shohei Ohtani. Who has impressed you the most at Florida? Like, obviously it's Jack, but who else has really just shown through on this Florida team? Because we could be here for hours naming names, but I guess who's that one guy when you turn on the TV, you're most excited to watch? And Jack Caglione, you can't answer that one because that's too easy.
It's kind of take your pick with Florida. Like Langford had a lower body injury for a while. He came back and he's playing like he hasn't missed a stride. He went 2 for 4. I think it was on Friday with a jack against Tennessee. And then against Auburn, he had a really good series as well. So it's like Langford came back and hasn't missed a beat. But I think what Langford's doing, I don't know if it was almost expected. Caglione, it's a cop-out answer to say you're most impressed with him. But when I turn on the TV or streaming or whatever, and I watch Florida play, the guy that I'm most impressed with, and I think is a real key reason as to why they are where they are right now, is Josh Rivera. And he's an experienced guy. He's their starting shortstop, has been for a couple seasons now. Had sort of an up and down career to this point. Not a ton of production. Was still figuring some things out at the plate. This year, he's playing great defense over at shortstop. At the plate, what he's been doing, I can't overstate how unbelievable it is. He's hitting 398, 13 home runs, 46 RBIs, is second on the team, only to Caglione. And he's walking more than he's striking out. And it's a really violent operation at the plate, but it's under control at the same time. He's got lightning bat speed. He gets the ball in the air often. The quality of contact is really good. And he's played himself from, gosh, going into this season. I don't know where he was on draft boards, probably maybe late day 2, early day 3. Maybe that was even a little generous, but he's played himself into a surefire top 4 round guy. And if he keeps producing in SEC play, we've seen what happens to guys' draft stocks with a good SEC tournament or regional. I mean, he could go even higher than that. So I think I'm most impressed with Josh Rivera because of the turnaround that he's had and the consistency at which he's produced. Like, this isn't 3 good series. He's done it all year. So I'm most impressed with him.
And number 2, we got the Demon Deacons, Wake Forest, commonly referred to as Rake Forest. I mean, the Bash brothers are here. College baseball's version of Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco with Nick Kurtz and Brock Wilken. But I am the biggest Rhett Lauder guy. I've said this a million times, but every single time I turn on the TV to watch him, he just gives me these Kevin Gausman vibes. He's got a changeup from hell. The thing darts out of the zone. He can throw the ball wherever he wants, and now he's sitting with a 1.40 ERA. If I'm a team, I'm drafting him within the top 10 picks. I think he's going to be one of those pitchers who's ready early and then just rises up the ranks and is one of those next great college pitchers that you see pretty soon. I'd love to get your opinion on that too. But then you have a guy like Sean Sullivan who's really stepped up in that Saturday role. They're just a phenomenal team that they can beat you in shootouts, right? If one of their pitchers has a tough day, they can beat you 12-10. But at the same time, if Sullivan and Lauder got it, they can beat you in low-scoring games too. They're just so good. And if LSU didn't have every good player in the country, they would be running away with it. I think they're just an incredible watch.
Yeah, so we talked about them going into this season, and I'll pat ourselves on the back. We were high on Wake, which was a really hot take given like the makeup of their roster and how good they were. But we were kind of, I wouldn't say expecting this because they're 28-4 and rolling through teams. But if you had told us that, I don't think we would have been totally surprised. But Lauder,
Pete,
like you said,
if we look at the odds, right? If we looked at the odds, plus 1,900 on them, right now they're plus 750 to win the College World Series. Like, they have dropped a considerable amount. They were around 8 or 9, if I'm correct, in the preseason rankings. Now they're the definitive number 2. So it wasn't a hot take to say that they'd be really good, but I think if you and I were saying like, oh, they'd definitely be the number 2 team at this point in the season, I think that would be a relatively hot take. And now there's no debate.
No, none at all. And if you look at their rotation, he was my pick to win ACC Pitcher of the Year for the second year in a row. Lauder was. He's on his way to being a top 20 overall draft pick. Like you said, changeup's a plus pitch, slider's a plus pitch. Great mound presence. He's a pro starter. And he'd be well on his way to winning the award if he wasn't also accompanied by Sean Sullivan and Josh Hartle in the rotation. Hartle's got a 1.9 ERA, 69 Ks to 7 walks in 46 innings.
That's going to
play. And then Sullivan, I think, has taken the country by storm with what he's done. He's got a 1.5 ERA and then 71 Ks to 9 walks in 40 innings.
All 3 of their guys have ERAs under 2, Pete. They're insane.
And they're all on the Golden Spikes mid-season watch list, which super impressive honor. And I think Sullivan's probably going to win ACC Pitcher of the Year if I had to guess, assuming he keeps this up. But then, sure, you talk about their rotation and how good they are. They're also getting production out of the bullpen with guys like Seth Keener having an ERA under 1 over 30 innings. Michael Massey throws 98. He's kind of, to me, he seems like that next guy where next year after Lauder and Sullivan, who's sophomore eligible, it was kind of iffy if Sullivan was going to get drafted in a good enough spot where he'd want to sign this year. I think he's proven that he's going to go in probably the top 3 or 4 rounds at the latest this year. So I think Michael Massey is a guy to me that profiles out of the bullpen to make that jump into a weekend starter role and be the next guy in 2024 where people are like, where did Michael Massey come from? This kid's throwing 97, 99 with a hammer breaking ball. And it's like, that's just what Wake does. They've got the best pitching development of anyone in the country with the pitching lab. Coach Mascara does an outstanding job. And their pitching is great. I'd put their staff up against anyone in the country on any day. But then you go to their lineup and it's like they give pitchers no break. It's Tommy Hawk at the top, who's got incredible bat to ball skills, plays the game incredibly hard. He's another sophomore eligible guy who should go in the top 5 rounds, top 5 or 6 rounds.
Love him.
He's so fun to watch. And then you got the Bash brothers with Nick Kurtz and Brock Wilkin, and Kurtz is 6'5". He's got great back control. His long levers allow him to really barrel any pitch, no matter where it's thrown. It makes him impossible to pitch to. And it's like, okay, maybe we'll pitch around Kurtz, and you can't pitch around Kurtz because you'll be met with Wilkin, and Wilkin is Wilkin. He's got 70 raw power. He's absolutely pulverizing the baseball. He's made some tweaks to his setup and swing that I really like this year. And then in talking to Coach Walter before the season, he had mentioned someone like Pierce Bennett as someone to watch as who could really surprise some people. And he was spot on. Bennett's hitting 345, 12 doubles, 4 home runs. And it's just little things. Like Pierce Bennett was a huge reason why they swept yesterday in their abbreviated series with NC State. They had 7 RBIs as a team. He had 4 of them. He went 4 for 5, a couple doubles. It's just guys like that. And you need guys like that to win national championships. You're not going to do it on the backs of very seldom. Are you going to do it on the backs of just 2 or 3 guys? You need a complete team effort. And people like Pierce Bennett, Justin Johnson, Adam Cesare, they give Wake those key supplemental pieces to go all the way. And I'm a real believer in them to do that. And again, if we were picking the national champion again, I'd still stick with Wake, and I'd be even more convicted on them.
I'd still stick with Wake, but they got that team in the way. And number 1, Louisiana State University, LSU, the Tigers. They have the 2 best players in the country. Dylan Cruz is living up to his name, the Cruz Missile, and maybe even more so. He's leading the nation in batting average, and it ain't close. The dude is hitting .525, which is 40 points more than second place. Paul Skeens has allowed 6 earned in 47 innings, and that's even, I don't know if those stats included his start against South Carolina, where they actually got to him, which I found fascinating. That game was incredible in itself, that whole series. I mean, you talked about that we were, robbed of a Sunday game, but that whole series, even Friday and Saturday, were incredible. Paul Skeens is that dude. He's going to be, I think, the first pitcher taken. He's just got something different. And I thought it was incredible, right? He's coming from a service academy to LSU, and he steps up and he didn't miss a beat. This guy is incredible. And he was a 2-way guy at Air Force. Like, he was hitting bombs, and now he doesn't have to because LSU has this incredible lineup. And LSU, they got Tommy Tanks, the transfer from NC State, who led the nation in home runs as a freshman. And he's not even being mentioned with Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens, even though he should be because he's having a great year. But it's crazy that the guy who led the nation in home runs last year and is still having a great year isn't Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz. This team is just, what they're doing right now is what everyone thought they would be doing, which is really hard in college baseball, right? Like, a team like that, obviously they're kids. You get these expectations. You get the coach from Minnesota, the pitching coach, who leaves the Minnesota Twins in order to be your pitching coach. You have all the transfers. You have all the NIL money in the world. And yet you're still living up to expectations. That's what's been the coolest thing for me about LSU. What's been the best thing to you about the Louisiana State University Tigers?
That's the thing, is I think you bring up a great point with the expectations part of it, because coming into the year, their expectations from everyone, I think, in a word, was honestly perfection. They were talking about how perfectly the roster was built. They've got great coaching. They've got a great coaching staff. There's never really been a team like this in recent memory. Any slip up would be really held against them, and they haven't tripped once. They've lost. Sundays have been a little bit of a bugaboo for them, but even with a roster like this, the SEC is just such good baseball where, I mean, you're not going to go no one's going to go 56-0. But everywhere you look, you've got the number one hitter in the draft, Dylan Cruz, who's putting up, he's like playing road to the show on beginner mode. He's hitting 5'10", 9 jacks, walking twice as much as he's striking out. Paul Skeens, number one pitcher in the draft, up to 102, sliders a wipeout pitch, changeup's a plus pitch. His entire arsenal is I think it's 3+ pitches, which nobody else has that in the country. 91 Ks in 47 innings. He's going to win pitcher of the year. Cruz will win player of the year. And actually, I don't know about Cruz. Maybe, yeah, Cruz will probably win player of the year. Just considering the fact he's probably going to hit around like 450 with 15+ home runs. But then who
else would win it if it wasn't Cruz?
That's a good question. Like, I think you got to talk about Ethan Petrie.
Yeah.
Just in that same breath, he's hitting 442 himself with 15 home runs. It's kind of like
it's crazy.
Maybe the power makes up for what he lacks, and it's crazy talking about what he lacks in average. He's hitting 445, but like comparing him to Dylan Cruz, you're gonna have those outlandish conversations. But again, it's like Tommy White he leads the team with 11 home runs. He's second nationally with 51 RBIs. Jared Jones, of course, their true freshmen are playing well too, because Jared Jones has just stupid power. He's got 9 home runs. He's also hitting 350. And then their kind of Josh Rivera, in my mind, is Gavin Dugas. He's a 5th-year player. Production wasn't what it was this year at all. So far in his college career, he's hitting 344, 10 home runs. He has a knack for big moments and for getting a big hit. He had a big home run against Tennessee in their series. He had that game tying and probably series saving grand slam this past weekend against South Carolina, and he's been the catalyst for them. And then on the mound, supplementing Skeens, Ty Floyd's been great. Christian Little has been strong. They're still kind of trying to figure out their Sunday spot a little bit. Thatcher Hurd has great ability. He's just been a little inconsistent at times. The injury bug has hit their staff a little bit, but no one's going to want to play them. They play with a chip on their shoulder. They don't walk into any series expecting to win. They actually go out and prove it day in and day out. They play with a lot of swag, a productive amount of swag. And then the Johnsons, Coach Wes Johnson and Coach Jay Johnson, they've got them as prepared as anyone in college baseball. So there is a lot of talent, just talking this through with you, just in the top 5 teams in the country. And it's really unbelievable because there are so many other good teams in the country, and Omaha sleepers and teams with Omaha upside. So I'm looking forward to the home stretch here and seeing how regionals shake out and all of that, because it's sure to be a really fun rest of the season.
So for anyone, this is the Just Baseball Show. We talk all forms of baseball on this podcast, but we mostly talk about Major League Baseball. Of course, it's April 10th as we're sitting here recording, so the baseball season is underway, but I've been having so much fun watching college baseball this year. And you said that regionals are coming up, all that kind of stuff. Let's say someone hasn't tuned into college baseball yet. What should they be on the watch for? Like, what's the schedule moving forward? Regionals, getting to Omaha, just lay out kind of the schedule before we say goodbye.
Yeah, so we kind of, after Easter is when I kind of start looking at things like RP, like teams' resumes, basically. It's when it starts to matter. It's like early on, you're not going to be like, oh, they're 8-1, they've got an RPI of 6, they're going to host. Like now is when it actually starts to matter. So each series, each game becomes very important for teams, especially those on the bubble. And late May is the conference tournaments for the Power 5 conferences, ACC, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12 now, which is great that they've got a conference tournament. And then regionals start right on June 1, and it's a sprint to the finish from there. It's regionals for, I think, 5 days, depending on how each pod shakes out. And then it's a couple of days off before jumping into super regionals. And super regionals are a best of 3 format between 2 teams. It's a winner from this regional, winner from that regional. They'll meet here and they'll play a best of 3 series, and the winner goes to Omaha. And by the second week of June, we'll have the 8 for Omaha, and then the College World Series is 9 days in the middle of June. I think it's the 15th to the 25th this year, which would be 10 days. So that would bring us to the end, which it's crazy to talk about the season ending in 2.5 months, but there's a ton of action still to be had. A lot of upsets, I'm sure, a lot of storylines that we wouldn't even think of happening to this point. So that's what's great about baseball, and especially college baseball. So there's sure to be a lot of fun left to be had.
Well, thanks so much, Pete, for coming on. It's always a blast to talk college baseball with you, and I'm sure we're going to be bringing you back on come the end of May, come June, get our people ready for the College Baseball World Series. That'll do it for this episode of the Just Baseball Show. Make sure to get your Just Baseball merch. I'm rocking my Just Baseball tee. The link is in the episode description. That is the best way to support this podcast. But if you don't want to spend a dime, we totally understand. Best way, again, to support is to rate this podcast 5 stars and leave a written review of anything else you'd like us to talk about, as well as click that subscribe button, hit the like button, and comment who your top 5 teams in college baseball are now on our YouTube page. You can find Pete's Twitter in our episode description. That is at Peter G. Flaherty on Twitter. He's my favorite college baseball follow, and I'm not even being biased. Seriously, breaks down so much good stuff. Even if you never watch an inning of college baseball and just follow Pete's Twitter, it's the best way to stay up to date on all college baseball stuff. Pete, genuinely, thank you for coming on, and we'll definitely be talking to you soon, my friend.
Oh man, thank you for having me on. It's always a blast to chop it up with you, and like we always say, we could talk about this for 3 hours. So I'm excited to come back on for the regionals and Omaha.
And with that, thank you, everybody.